good to have such support around you. Really good. And good to be here with a message right from the beginning, when God created all things. And of course, the bookends of the Bible are Genesis and Revelation. They're both equally important. And without the full understanding of them, the rest of the Bible is fairly meaningless. And of course, our Lord taught a lot about creation. And it didn't take millions of years. Genesis 1, the creation. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep. And the Spirit of God was moving over the surface of the waters. And this is how it started. Because God has power over all things, the deepest ocean, the highest mountain in the heavens and earth. And God said, let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters. Let it separate the waters from the waters. God made the expanse and separated the waters which were below the expanse from the waters which were above the expanse. And it was so. God called the expanse heaven. And there was evening and there was morning, a second day. They were 24-hour days, not 1,000-year days. And some people would have you believe the word is translated as a 24-hour day. Dinosaurs and man feature in the book of Job, which is, I think, the oldest book in the Bible. The book of Job, that's believed to be the oldest book. Some people think it's the first book ever written. It's a literary masterpiece. Everything that God instituted was done as a masterpiece. No second-rate material is in the Bible. It contains many expressions we use today, like by the skin of my teeth. It talks about two great monsters. Two monsters, one on land and the other in the sea. And Job describes a land beast, Behemoth, and a sea beast, Leviathan. And let's see if we can have a look at them. Yes. See, they're not extinct. Behemoth. This is, of course, a model. A land dinosaur, a mighty beast, ferocious. The Bible told us about dinos thousands of years before we found the first fossils. Misguided translators thought the huge animals described in Job were hippos, elephants, or crocodiles. Some thought they were not real creatures at all, but just mythical beings, dragons. And I don't believe they were mythical either. Then in about 1825, the first dinosaur fossils were found. A lot were on the Isle of Wight. And this is interesting. This is the quote from the Word. Behold now Behemoth, which I made with thee. He eateth grass as an ox, and his strength is in his loins, and his fur is in the navel of his belly. And he moves his tail like a cedar. He's got a huge tail like a cedar. So the King James Bible, translators, they thought they'd show Behemoth as a hippo. I don't think they've got tails like cedars, do you? So if we try and help out God, we get it wrong. Because God describes Behemoth in Job 40, verses 15 to 24. He eats grass, the strength is in his loins, his tail is like a cedar tree, his bones are like iron, he's the largest, the chief of all that God created. He lives in swampy places under trees, and his nose pierces snares, maybe a horn. Does that sound like a hippo or an elephant? They both have small tails. For hundreds of years, Bible commentators thought God was describing a hippo or an elephant. When you don't take the Bible literally, you very soon look foolish. They should have believed the Bible at face value, realized God was describing huge creatures that no longer existed, not hippos. This one, no, he's not at all like a hippo, is he? This one's 3 stories high. Some were 6 or more stories high. They were mighty creatures, terrifying. God describes Leviathan in Job 41. He was fierce, untamable. The very sight of him is terrifying. He was of frightening size and number of teeth. He had rows of scales firmly closed so he could not be pierced. He blew air out like a whale. He breathes fire, smoke comes out of his nostrils, churns up the water like a boiling pot, and he makes the water smell and leaves a shining track in the water. Again, sight of him is terrifying. Let's have another look at it. Hang on. No. Won't go back for me. Oh yes, there he is again. Yeah, 3 stories high. Some were twice that size, believe it or not. Now this is a picture that we took in a museum off Charmouth Bay, Dorset, over 4,500 years ago, 500 years before Abraham. This was the ichthyosaur, and this is just his head. It was about 5 feet long, and they fall down in these crumbling cliffs where there's a lot of rain and the cliffs crumble, and this is one of the things that tumbled out of the chalk, actually. Leviathan, the ichthyosaur. It's a monstrous creature. That's just his head. Imagine what the rest of him must have looked like. You wouldn't want to be swimming or paddling off Charmouth Bay, would you, really? And here is another illustration of the destruction of Leviathan. This is an end times text from Isaiah referring to the Lord's dealing with Satan. It shows how Leviathan may have looked. Isaiah 27 verse 1. Terrifying. There are stories, and they're all over in folklore and stories from regions around England and the rest of the country, and I've looked up some of them over the years. Stories of men fighting dragons, dinosaurs. St. George and the Dragon, for example. Saga of Beowulf fighting a monster called Grendel. Geoffrey of Monmouth tells of a monstrous creature terrifying villagers in the West Country in the Middle Ages. They were real things. They existed when men were still on the earth. When men were on the earth, they were still on the earth. Here's an illustration of George, the patron saint, and the dragon from the EU. This depicts the Manche region of Europe fighting the dragon, you see. These things were real. There's another one called the Monster of Peru. Could this be Leviathan? Scientists found a fossil skull of a sea monster, 43 feet long, with teeth that were 14 inches long. The head was 10 feet long. They think the creature preyed on other sea creatures. It was found off the coast of Peru. It could be Leviathan. Again, the King James Bible compilers didn't think God could accurately describe his monsters, so they helped him out. Here's Leviathan, you see, with a little tiny tail. Oh, honestly, nothing like a crocodile. Absolutely ridiculous. The real thing was much bigger and scarier. I was terrified. I ran from it, as you can see. It nearly got me. You'd have missed out on this presentation then. Maybe it should have got me. I got this actually in Dinosaur Valley State Park in Glen Rose, Texas, where dinosaur footprints have been found in the riverbed. There's proof upon proof upon proof that this is all true. They really existed. And I took this picture, Pat took the picture of my foot there actually, and dinosaur footprints of the Paluxy River. All the silt was washed away, and deeply embedded underneath and in the fossil strata were these dinosaur footprints. They were big, huge. They existed, and they walked around Texas before Texas was Texas. Here are some dinosaur tracks that again were exposed, and also in Glen Rose, Texas. It's very telling that there is a lot of evidence around if you care to believe it and see it and acknowledge that this is the truth. There were dinosaurs. When were the dinos made? God said, "Look now at Behemoth, which I made along with you." This means that God made the dinosaurs at the same time he made Adam. On day 6 of creation week, we've got to read the Bible and look what it's really saying. You know, I made along with you. That's clearly what it means. So men and dinos were on the earth at the same time. In the beginning was the Word, the true story of where we came from. John 1 verses 1 to 5. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and apart from him, nothing came into being that has come into being. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. This little building here, and obviously the people, not the building, it's like a lighthouse in the darkness, and the darkness often doesn't comprehend it. Men and mastodons live side by side. Here's some proof. I met a couple of them. This was in Missouri, Mastodon State Park, and again you get some idea of the monstrous size of these things and the power they must have had. You wouldn't be standing that close to it if it was alive. but fortunately it wasn't. These huge creatures were pre-flood, but they were not dinos. They lived alongside man. This was, we went to Hollywood and didn't look at the film studios, we looked at the La Brea tar pits, which were much more interesting actually. And the whole area that you see there is made of very thick tar. And if an animal fell into it, it's been there obviously a long time. If animals or anyone else, a person fell into it, they couldn't get out and they were sort of petrified in tar. And it's a very remarkable place actually. I was asked to stay there and write a book, but I didn't have 3 months to spare, so I came home. But I remembered and took the pictures. And alongside the complete fossils of many amazing animals are the remains of an Indian girl. So they lived at the same time. There are also 9-foot sloths. Handily, there are some giant redwood trees nearby. Again, this is at La Brea tar pits in Hollywood. Also interesting, Hollywood, of course, is the pornography capital of the world. And underneath some of the huge studios and skyscrapers where they put out all this filth to the world are boiling tar pits. That may be significant. I think that one day they're all going to go down into the tar and that'll be the end of the muck that they churn out. So all this is all set from the beginning, and God knew what was going to happen in a place called Hollywood, La Brea. The tar pits show this. And here is a little cartoon. Here's the little Indian girl, and they were actually fossilized, if you like, at the same time in the tar. Why did the dinos die out? Genesis tells us the flood of Noah killed everything that breathed about 4,500 years ago, all except the animals Noah took in the ark. The waters covered the whole earth to a depth of about 22 feet, 7 meters above the top of the tallest mountain. So millions of dinos died in the flood, many turned into fossils. The only dinos to survive were the young ones that Noah took into the ark. They were smaller, small enough to all get in. Is there any evidence of dinos dying in the flood of Noah? There is tons, literally, of evidence. Fossil graveyards are found in many places around the world where dinosaur bones are all mixed up with rhinos, elephants, deer, dogs, etc., all at the same time. The flood was sudden. It didn't just happen over months. It was very rapid. This picture proves this. It shows a fish swallowing a smaller fish at the very moment it was fossilized. I think that's a remarkable proof. All around the world, dino fossils have been found with their heads thrown back, gasping for air in the flood. There's lots of these pictures. The proof is out there. David Attenborough should look at it sometime instead of putting out all the false news he does and the ridiculous opinions about evolution, which is a scientific impossibility, by the way. The KT boundary of strata laid down all around the world. We took this picture actually in the Brecon Beacons. Below it are dinosaur fossils, above it no dinosaurs. Our conclusion is a flood wiped out the dinosaurs. An ammonite fossil, this was found by a daughter of mine on the beach in Dorset. So it must have been laid down suddenly, as sea creatures today just fall to the bottom and they just sort of decay and become mud or whatever. They do not become fossils. This happened rapidly. Here are some rock layers in St. Louis, Pat's home city, clearly laid down during the flood of Noah for those with eyes to see. An extinction event. Well, so-called scientists say there was an extinction event 95 million years ago. When they start talking about millions of years, you know they're telling lies, because they haven't got the faintest idea what they're talking about, which wiped out 95% of all the species of creatures. They think it was an asteroid. The Bible tells us the truth. It was the flood. There is zero evidence that the earth is millions of years old. Plenty telling us the earth is young. For example, floods of evidence. There are over 270 stories of a great flood in historic records all around the world, in country after country, peoples, groups all around the world. And I got this from Dinosaurs by Design by Dr. Duane Gish. 2 Peter 3 verses 5 to 6. It escapes their notice that by the word of God the heavens existed long ago, and the earth was formed out of water and by water, through which the world at that time was destroyed. being flooded with water. People are willfully ignorant. Thanks to the BBC and people like them, the world is willfully ignorant of the truth. They don't ever publish or broadcast the truth. Here is an Ark replica built in Holland. It was huge, not like the silly looking toy boats you see in cartoons. It was 450 feet long, 3 stories high, and there was ample room for 16,000 animals, 8 people and all the food for a year, with 5,000 tons of spare capacity. Again, this is from a feasibility study of Noah's Ark. It was all done by people who know what they're talking about. That's the size of this huge boat. Here are some sandstone outcrops in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and they struck Pat and I very forcefully because it was obvious that they were all falling apart very quickly, because we took this picture showing that unstable rock formations, caution. And it says, the rock outcroppings above have recently been disturbed by heavy rains, and many have fallen. Others appear ready to fall. Rain, hail, and the freezing and thawing of ice weaken the stone formations, result in both grain-by-grain erosion and occasional large rock falls. The rocks may tumble down today, or not for many years. For your protection, stay on the sidewalk. So they're very crumbly and feeble, so they couldn't last millions of years, could they? I mean, wake up, the people who wrote that. The crumbling cliffs at Charmouth. All round coastlines, cliffs are crumbling. Go to the Isle of Wight, we've been going there for about 50 years, and there's a place called the Underpath. 40 years ago it had big cracks in it. Now it doesn't exist. It's mostly all sort of cracked and fallen away. The road we used to drive down is no more, because it doesn't last millions of years. It lasts sometimes a few hundred. They haven't been there that long. We actually had a property on something called Blue Slipper, and that was a clay, and the front of it all started sliding down the hill. Could have been a calamity. Unfortunately, it was 4 stories in Ventnor. We actually got engineers along. They knocked out the bottom of the bay, 4 huge bays, you see, put in steel girders and propped it up and built it up and joined it up together. And I'll tell you something funny, because Pat said, well, that's the worst thing that could happen here. About 3 months later, an incredible storm hit the Isle of Wight and the roof was ripped off. So be careful what you say. That was covered by insurance, but the subsidence wasn't. The point I'm trying to make is that cliffs are not very solid. Granite ones are, but a lot of them around the country are not. They're crumbling. They haven't been there that long. It's a young Earth. So evolutionists are without excuse. And they will face judgment. 1 minute after they die, they'll realize they've been telling a lot of untruth to the children of the world and really fouling up their brains. And they're going to face the wrath of God. It's revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. This is a warning to all these commentators saying, well, 500 million years ago, they're telling the truth. They're suppressing the truth in unrighteousness, because that which may be known of God is manifested in them, for God has shown it unto them. For the invisible things of him from the creation are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. That's from Romans 1, 18 to 22. That's why I'm giving this talk. We have no excuse not to tell our children the truth, that evolution is a fairy story from hell. Here's another one. Spot the similarity, right? If you look at anything that David Attenborough and people like him say, you realise it's all absolute claptrap. They say dinosaurs evolved into birds. Well, you can see how similar they are, can't you? This one on the right is the nearest thing to a bird I could find. It's a parrot-billed dinosaur, you see, and on the left is a robin that wandered into our garden. So they're incredibly alike, and obviously I only think about 500 million years, and the one on the right turned into the one on the left, you see. If you believe that, you're a sucker for salesmen, I would say. Matthew 15, verse 14, he refers to the Pharisees and scribes. Let them alone. They are blind guides of the blind. These are the commentators I'm talking about. And if a blind man guides a blind man, both will fall into a pit. That's the end of my part 1. my next talk, lets the facts in the Bible demolish Darwin and all the truth benders on TV and in schools. And we should always remember this and unscramble their brains. That includes our grandchildren. Misleading children and their parents is taken seriously by the Lord. Those who do so face the ultimate punishment unless they repent. And that is what they should do. And that is the end of part 1. Thank you.